Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today, Thursday, the 5th of October, for our Rutland Schools Forum meeting. I'm going to do welcomes and apologies to begin with, and we have got a number of new members to the group who I will welcome. Mr. Oliver Teasel, who is head of Harrington School. He will be attending as the new post-16 provision representative. So welcome to you, Oliver. We also have Mr. Craig Charteris, CEO of the Brookhill Academy Trust. Has Craig joined the meeting yet, Jane?
He hasn't joined us as yet, but I did speak to him earlier on and he did say he was going to be joining the meeting. He's probably having some IT issues.
Okay, well, we should welcome him in his absence nonetheless. Craig will be attending as one of the Academy representatives. So welcoming you both. We also have Councillor Tim Smith, who I believe is our new portfolio holder for Children's Services. Is this Tim's first meeting?
Yes, it is.
Well, welcome to you, Tim. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person soon.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think it's in the diary somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Super. So welcome.
Thank you. And
today is Joe Ward's last meeting as the PVI Early Years representative. So, Joe, we'll thank you now for everything you've done representing your sector at Schools Forum, and I hope you enjoy the final meeting. Okay, Jane, would you like to run through the apologies that you've received?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies have been received from Steve Cox, who's the Vice Chair, Carl Smith, Gary Morphus, Andrew Merry and Helen Chester.
Okay, thank you very much. And just for some online meeting etiquette, if we could have people using the hands up button if you've got comments, questions or queries throughout the meeting, and both myself and Jane will get we'll keep our eyes peeled for those as we go through. Also, I think everyone's done this, but muting microphones as well, apart from when you're speaking, of course, that helps with the acoustics. So I'm going to move on to item 2, which is to review the minutes and actions from our meeting that we held on the 22nd of June, 2023. I'll go through them one page at a time, and if members could just shout up if there are any challenges, queries, questions or changes that you would like to make. So if we could go through page 1, which details everyone who was present, apologies and absentees. Page 2, which is page 8 of the document pack, I believe. Page 3, which is page 9 of the document pack. Page 4, which is page 10 of the document pack. Page 5, which is page 11 of the document pack. And finally, page 6, which is page 12 of the document pack. Can I ask the group whether we feel that is a true and accurate record of the meeting that we held? Any changes to those meetings? Just give people a couple of moments to shout up. Stuart's got his hand up. So Stuart, would you like to go?
I'm a little bit remiss, but I keep on trying to get hold of the confidential documents, and I can never get into the extranet, which I feel embarrassed to say it because I can't say whether the minutes are accurate or not, because I sit here listening to them and think that's okay, but I try to log in, I've just done it again, I try to reset password and I don't get an email. So I don't know if I've not been set up or I'm doing something wrong, but could somebody signpost me about who I should email to do that?
Yes, Jane, could you advise on that one, please?
Yeah, Chair. Normally on a set of minutes or an agenda, we will put if there's a confidential item so that you can then log in to the council's intranet service and access the confidential items. I've never actually known any confidential items being discussed at the Schools Forum. Everything is published on the public council website. But what I'll do is, Stuart, I will email you your username and login details so that you've got them if any you need them at all.
Thanks ever so much. I feel like the naughty schoolboy now.
Okay, so I'm just looking on my screen, I can't see any other hands up. So, Jane, I think we can take those as a true and accurate record of what was discussed on the 22nd of June. So we'll turn then to the actions, which are on the last page of the minutes. So action number 1 was for the clerk to investigate if the meeting of the Parent Carer Voice Collaborative Group had been held in June and which members of school staff had attended.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I spoke with the Early Help Coordinator and she confirmed that a meeting of the Parent Collaborative Group had been held on the 6th of June at the Wisteria Hotel in Oakham, but that no representatives from Rutland schools had been present.
Okay. What I think I will do is speak with colleagues from Rutland County Council outside of this meeting to see what we can do about ensuring that school staff are present at those meetings. So action number 2 was Sharon Milner to arrange a meeting of the Rutland Head Teachers Cohort for them to provide feedback regarding multi-agency guidance. I personally don't know whether Sharon got round to this before she left the group.
I haven't received any information from her.
Okay. Well, I think we can assume then, as if nobody else has any information on that action hasn't taken place, and I'm not sure we can take that much further at this point. Action 3 then was for Catherine Pullen to notify the clerk of her replacement as the PVI Early Years representative. And Jane, you've got an update on that for us, haven't you?
I have, Chair. Thank you. Yes. The early years providers have been contacted requesting nominations for Schools Forum representatives. The closing date for those nominations is actually tomorrow. We have received a nomination, but I can't confirm anything until after the closing date. So I will provide an update at the next meeting.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And finally, action 4 was the clerk to write to all schools requesting nominations for representatives for academies and academy governors.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that action has been completed, and we've received 2 nominations for deputies. So full details will be given at the next meeting.
Excellent. Right, okay. We shall move on to item 3, which is the annual election of chair and vice chair. For that, I need to hand back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. So exciting. Annually we have to vote for a new chair and vice chair for the Schools Forum. Members of the Schools Forum were contacted. 2 nominations were received for the role of vice chair. 1 nomination was received for the role of chair for the academic year 2023/2024. The role of chair, the nominee was Ben Solly, and he has agreed to accept that nomination. The 2 nominations for the role of vice chair were Steve Cox and Carl Smith. A subsequent election was taken of members, and I can confirm that Steve Cox received the most votes. Unfortunately, Mr. Cox is not available today, but I have spoken with him and he has agreed to accept the role. So it's just up to the Schools Forum to formally approve those positions for chair and vice chair. If we could have a show of hands, please. Thank you, that's confirmed. The schools forum also needs to formally agree that the two head teachers, i.e. Ben Solly and Steve Cox, can hold the positions of chair and vice chair respectively for the academic year 2023-24, as they are both from academies, as per the schools forum constitution. If I can have a show of hands to show that you are in agreement. Thank you. That's all sorted, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Jane. So that takes us on to item 4. I noticed that Craig has joined us. Craig, we welcomed you right at the beginning, but now that I can see you on my screen, I'll welcome you again. Welcome to Schools Forum. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 4 is the annual review of the Constitution and the rules of conduct. This is a document we have to approve every year. So I have to take it that we've all read and digested this. And Jill, you normally take care of this item, I believe. So I'm going to hand over to you at this point, Jill.
We went out to consultation and nothing was received to say that there are any disagreements with it. So I think if we're all in agreement that the document that was presented at last Schools Forum, there were no additional requirements. So therefore, if we're happy, then the decision is that this will run for this annual cycle. So show of hands just to say that we agree to that, please.
Thank you, Jill. Just going to give people a couple of seconds. Craig has a hand up. Okay, Craig, I'm assuming that was a hand up in error. Is that okay? Fantastic. All right, then. Well, I don't see any other.
No objections.
No objections. That's great. Thank you, Jill. Let's move on then. Item 5 is a finance update split into 2 parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is the school's budget for 2024-25. Has no initials next to this in terms of who will be presenting it from the council. So, Jill.
Andrew is on leave, and so he asked if anybody had any questions regarding the budget, then if they could send that through the clerk to Andrew, he will make sure that a response is sent back through to Schools Forum. Stuart.
I'm not really happy about that. I think it's important that a financial officer from the local authority presents and is able to take questions directly from the Schools Forum as part of the Schools Forum meeting.
Dawn?
Yeah, I'll take that back, Stuart. I mean, the issue is that Andrew Murray is our head of finance, and him and our children's accountant are both on leave at the same time. And there's no other children's services accountants within the local authority. So, but I will take that back in terms of feedback that back to finance colleagues.
Okay, I think it's an important point that Stuart raises, and I think as an action, Jane, can we ask that we do have a person who will be able to present and take questions on this in future meetings, please? Some measures put in place to ensure that we're not in a similar situation next year.
I'm sorry, but I think it's a core function of Schools Forum is to scrutinise and ask questions around schools funding, and you need the people who prepare the accounts to do that, especially when we're being asked again to transfer money from the main block into SEND and all of those bits and pieces. Sorry to be a pain.
No, I don't think you've been a pain at all, Stuart. I totally agree. It's important that we do that at this meeting. So. I think that's a really important action for us to take away. Any other comments or questions from the group on item 5A? Okay, we should move on to item 5B, which is the funding for.
Sorry, Chair, the previous school's budget, I believe the schools forum is being asked to make a decision regarding the transfer of 0.5% to the high needs blocks schools.
Okay.
I'm just finding the report.
But we're basically being asked to nod that through, which I think is really poor practice, really poor.
I agree, Stuart. I don't like making a decision on something I haven't seen. I know it's something that has happened in terms of a decision has been made like this in previous years. We've done this on numerous occasions now, but without seeing the numbers, it's very difficult to make an informed decision on it. I think that schools forum members need to be presented with this information as soon as possible. As soon as Andrew is able to do that when he returns from leave, I think we need to see that. So I believe all we can do is approve it in principle, but allow for members of the schools forum to ask him questions. Ultimately, we don't get that discussion, which is what this group is here for, which is very, very unfortunate, actually.
We may as well not turn up. You know, if this is how we're going to be treated, I think it's not great practice. I really don't. You know, this is an important decision. It's only made annually, and I think somebody from the local authority is in a position to present when this is taking money out of schools, and all of our schools' budgets are extraordinarily tight. It doesn't matter whether you're running a primary, a math, or a secondary. None of us have got a lot of money, and this is taking money out without even the courtesy of talking through where that is, why that is. And you know, it talks about in the report about we're making good progress. It doesn't actually say what that progress is, and we're being asked to still transfer funds across.
I mean, I have to say I agree entirely. Stuart, Dawn?
Yeah, so I've heard what Stuart said. I mean, in terms of the progress around the SEND recovery plan, Schools Forum have received updates throughout the last year about that. So it's not that there hasn't been any updates shared with Schools Forum. I think the point about if Schools Forum are not going to make a decision today, and the point about the 150,000, which is in the report, in terms of the transfer, that would be if the decision of Schools Forum today is not to agree that transfer, it will mean that we will have to relook at our SEND support. So the schools, so an example being our school support partnership, that all the work that's done through that sort of endeavour in partnership clearly with our education colleagues, they're the things that that are paid for within that transfer, that block transfer, and they're the things that we would have to relook at because there is no other pot of money available in terms of council budget. So that clearly hear that loud and clear, and I'll write to the head of finance directly after this meeting. But they're the sort of kind of trade-offs that Schools Forum would have to consider if you're not wanting to make a block transfer into the high needs block this year.
Thank you, Dawn. I think anybody who works in schools would want any of those services that we've had over the last couple of years to diminish in any way, because they are having a very positive impact, and we have seen that. I think if I was to put myself in someone like Craig's shoes, who's joining this meeting for the first time and leads a group of schools, he's having to make this decision, or being asked to make a decision blindly. For people like myself and Stuart, who've been part of this group for some time, we've historically made those decisions to transfer that money, but we've had a presentation and we know what the services are. I don't want to speak for you, Craig, but we're asking someone like you to make a decision blindly here.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's I don't think anyone in any county would question the need for high needs funding and all the rest of it, and the schools block to be going over there. But it is a bit strange to just being asked to decide on a figure that's going to move without any information about that. So I agree with you and Stuart. I think we need more information, but that's not to say that it shouldn't happen, because we all know it needs to happen, but it does need to be an informed decision, I think.
I mean, thank you, Craig. The alternative to us, if we don't approve this at today's meeting, is that those services that have become really important to our schools, as Dawn says, are not going to be funded this year, which causes a big problem for the children in our schools. But for those of us that have responsibility for school finances, you know, there's a lot on trust there that we are being asked to decide on without being presented with documentation. So I am, as the chair, I'm going to have to ask for people to vote to put this through, but we need to be very conscious of the issues that have been laid out as a result of no representative being here to present us with the detail. Jane, if you could coordinate a vote for us, please, to see whether the group are happy for this allocation to be made of 0.5%.
Thank you, Chair. All those in favour of continuing to transfer the 0.5% to the high needs block schools, please raise your hand. Thank you. That is confirmed, and it is resolved that the Schools Forum has noted the content of the report, and that there is an action for Dawn Godfrey to speak to the Director of Resources.
Well, the content of the report is the report wasn't there, but we would like to see that at the earliest possible opportunity, please. And I think that needs to be emailed directly to all members of School Forum.
Jane, could you send me a copy of that finance report? And I just want to, so that I can use it to send on to the Director of Resources as well. Thanks.
Yes, I will do that for you now.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of hands up. We've got Tim and Stuart. So Tim, was yours just left up or not? I believe it is. Stuart.
Sorry, it was left up, but I'm in the same position as Craig, you know, being new to this and, you know, having to just and not having the full facts to hand. But anyway, I think it's important that funds are transferred to support SEND.
Thank you. And Stuart, final point on this for you.
Yeah, I don't think this is the first time we've asked things from finance and not had them. And I don't think that's acceptable. And I think at some point we have to say no in order that the function of the Schools Forum is properly fulfilled. It's not acceptable to put things through that are on the nod. I'm the first as a school that is very inclusive, supportive of SEND, but I'm also protective of our older head teacher colleagues with the financial pressure we're all under, and the fact that that funding takes money away from the mainstream and puts it into SEN, and we should at least have real clear justification of that. And it's only right that we have somebody from finance presenting properly the rationale and the understanding of that decision making. And as I say, it's not the first time.
Thank you, Stuart. Jane?
Just thinking, which is scary, I know. I was thinking if you could possibly, once Andrew has returned from leave, calling an additional meeting of the Schools Forum, like a special meeting, specifically to resolve the school's budget issue and discuss that and formally approve. It would mean calling an additional meeting, but it could be done virtually.
The problem is I'm really struggling for time, and I guess I'm not the only one. Making this meeting has been really challenging. I had open evening last night, and I guess that's part of my frustration is I have very limited time, and then to spend it in a meeting where we're not properly serviced is not helpful.
Okay, well, I think we've heard loud and clear, certainly school members' disappointment in a lack of presentation there, and we need to take that forward to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm going to move the agenda on at this point. funding for trade union facilities time. Jane, do you know who is presenting this? This again has no there's no initials next to it. Is it Jill?
I can. It's I think it was sent to us from the unions and a recommendation that it was presented to Schools Forum for discussion. But we haven't got our union Schools Forum representative here, have we? So
who is Gary Morphus was here previously. Is Gary still the person who represents unions, Jane?
He is, and unfortunately, he literally sent his apologies about half an hour ago.
Okay. So this document is asking Schools Forum to centralise some funds which will be used to account for facilities times in school for union representatives, I believe.
I think that was the purpose of the request.
Again, I'm without a representation from somebody from a union, I'm not sure we can make a decision on this, to be honest. So unless anyone has any strong feelings about this, I'm going to move on. Okay. So the decision there is no decision, Jane. Right, item 6 is the SEND improvement plan. This is from Bernadette. So at this point, Bernadette, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just cover a couple of things in this short slot. When we're referring to the improvement plan, it's probably worth considering that we've had, as Dawn referred to, an improvement plan, a recovery plan for some time, and we brought updates to this group. So but what I want to sort of focus a little on is the DfE Delivering Better Value programme, which is referred to as an improvement plan. So in effect, what we've been doing in Rutland around our SEND recovery plan is now morphing into our DBV improvement plan. So I'll make reference to that and give you a little bit of detail on that. I do have a presentation which I'm happy to pass on to Jane if you would like to have that with the minutes after the meeting. I'll also make reference to the capital programme, which has been underway for some time, and this is the next phase. And then just make reference finally to the CQC and Ofsted inspection and in effect, if that's okay. So, Rutland is part of the phase 2 of the national programme, with the ultimate aim of supporting local authorities to manage the deficit in their high needs funding. And that programme is set to run over the next 18 months to 2 years. A considerable amount of work has been happening in Rutland and with colleagues. Many of you have been involved in completing diagnostic exercises in the last 12 months to really understand our SEND system in Rutland and to really look in depth at children's pathway, children's journey into the SEND system. The programme itself will be reviewed in terms of its effectiveness through the DSG management plan, which the local authority has had to respond on before. And the expectation with any investment that we get from the DfE is to see a return on investment over 5 years. And that very much reflects what we've talked about here and what we've been our intention through the SEND recovery plan. So in effect, we're building on the existing SEND recovery plan in Rutland. And there are a number of things we'll want to do within that, including the time is right for us to consider updating and refreshing our SEND and inclusion strategy for Rutland. And many of my colleagues in schools and education, other education providers have been part of doing that way back in 2019. So there's time for a refresh on the strategy. We want to review the strategic area partnership governance arrangements so that they're in line with their fit for purpose, and also that it reflects the SEND national direction of travel and the social care reforms. and many of you will be aware of the consultation that took place around the Green Paper on the SEND reforms, and now the National Change Programme that has been launched. I think what's key in the intention of the DPV programme is really to build that community confidence. And what comes through very clearly is that engagement with across the system, our colleagues in health and education, and in particular engaging our community of parents and children. The work has been taking place, as I say, over the last 12 months, and that diagnostic analysis really looked in considerable depth at Rutland SEND systems. There was a number of surveys carried out that went to parents and carers, went to education providers. There was a series of listening forums that took place. Quite a large number, almost a third of the education, health and care plans in Rutland undertook a case review. And many colleagues from across education, health and social care and parents were contributed to those discussions. And then we undertook quite detailed analysis looking at case level data going back to 2017. And that was all about understanding what were the things that through a transformation programme we'd want to address for Rutland. So in summary, and I can give you a lot more detail after this meeting and share with you in hard format. There's a number of things we felt that were emerging as key work streams. They included really improving our strategic data and reporting. So we really understood, and we talked about this in the past, about knowing what our needs were, understanding our data, being able to predict need, being able to therefore plan provision. In addition to that was really accelerating the confidence in our mainstream education placements for children with EHCPs. Now, I think Dawn referenced the Supporting Schools Partnership, which has really contributed and been critical to raising that confidence, not only with our parents in terms of supporting children in school, but also our school workforce in terms of their capacity and confidence to support children. What came out through the case reviews was really understanding the range of ordinarily available provision we have in Rutland. That in turn helps us to understand and avoid some of those specialist placements. We've talked before here about the challenge in relying on independent provision and out of area provision. And one of the things that we want to do is extend what the Supporting Schools Partnership has been doing by putting more resource into therapeutic teams, into the OT, into supporting children with social and emotional needs, and actually strengthening some of our area SENCO capacity as well. What is apparent from our discussions with parents as well, and take, for example, children who might be on a neurodevelopmental pathway, what became clear was that we need to put community support in for parents as well. That support that happens outside school, that happens outside the local authority, it might be through voluntary and peer support, but that's very powerful, and we've got some really good examples in Rutland. But it's about building that family support around children and families who have a disability. So how does a child's disability or SEND needs impact on family life? And as I mentioned already, that strong collaboration in designing a system with parents, really engaging families in that process. So their perception and confidence in a mainstream school system is growing, and therefore the decisions they made about requesting a child have an assessment or needing an EHC plan, we create a balanced view on that. We have been successful through that work. We've been working with external consultants and the DFE, and we have had to submit quite a detailed implementation plan, and we have been successful in securing the DFE grant, and that's an investment of £1 million for Rutland SEND system, and we're just working up what that plan will look like, and it will have a number of work streams I've referred to, and when we got a bit more detail around that in the next couple of weeks, I'd really would like to update our schools partnerships on that on that plan and how we intend to do that. Probably what would be significant for this group is the confidence that Schools Forum have shown in the recovery plan already, and particularly the Supporting Schools Partnership, is that we want to continue that, but also put more capacity in there. And one of the things which has been interesting that's come from this exercise, that parents tell us, my child gets the really good support through the Schools Partnership, then they move into the EHCP process and system, and that stops. So we're looking at how do you continue to support children with those services, that therapeutic support, even when they've got an EHCP. That's the position we're in at the moment. The link to that is the FE Capital Programme, and you will be aware that we've come here and we've reported back on the work that's already happened in terms of extending and enhancing our SEND provision in Rutland, and we've got some really successful provision in place. We've got our ERP provision at UCC and our Mainstream Plus, and we have our nursery provision at Edith West. What we're now able to do is to consider how we use the remaining capital funding. We have just over £1 million remaining, and we have sketched out, having spoken with lots of colleagues and through the SSP, what do we feel Rutland needs. And we believe what colleagues are telling us is there's 3 particular areas. What I'm going to describe as Mainstream Plus, that in effect for primary schools. Our colleagues in primary schools will tell us that sometimes to be able to manage children's needs, you need some quiet space for children to be able to feel nurtured and supported. And that may be minor refurbishment of a space in school or creating a space. So that's some of the feedback we've had from school colleagues about creating primary nurturing environments. And obviously we're taking the lessons we've learned from our colleagues at Edith Weston in that regard. Another key area for us, and it's in line with the national programme and alternative provision, is to create some alternative provision, potentially in the secondary phase. And that again is supporting children, as we know, through their social and emotional needs or their additional needs, who may be at risk of exclusion, for example, but how we can put some of education that may be outside of the mainstream curriculum. So we have a number of children that we're managing to our section 19 support. So they may be children who are having tuition, one-to-one support to enable them to be able to reintegrate into their school. So we're just in the process. We've sketched out, based on the feedback we've had from colleagues in schools and through the SSP, what those 3 projects might look like. And our next step is to issue expressions of interest to school colleagues to enable you to come back and tell us what you could do as part of that programme. And then we hope to take a proposal through Cabinet in the latter part of this year, and then begin to allocate funding from December onwards to enable schools. And we would use the same model we had before, which we believe works well, which would be able to passport a grant through to our schools to be able to develop some provision within their schools. I think the important thing to say, which we've mentioned here before, is that is capital revenue. There isn't revenue and allocation alongside this, but we believe through what we're spending already in the High Needs Fund that we can support some of this activity as well. These are children that our schools are already supporting. That's something that we will be alerting colleagues to very soon. And finally, if I may, just to finish, just to draw your attention to the CQC and Ofsted outcomes of our inspection that took place in May. And again, just to make our thanks to you on behalf of the local authority for the support you gave every day, but in particularly during the inspection. And it was a rigorous process. I'm pleased to be able to come to you today and say we're not faced with an improvement plan. The outcome of the inspection was very positive, and there was a lot in there. I think probably one of the headlines we were most pleased about was inspectors referring to children as thriving. In fact, and these were the words of parents: children thriving in Rutland and living their best possible life, due to the support they receive in Rutland. So I think it's a document, and it's an outcome that all of us should be very proud of. So I should stop there, and I do apologise that is that's a rather rushed presentation, but I'm happy to take questions or comments, and certainly to share more detail about anything I've referred to.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernadette. Stuart, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things really. I think first of all, connected with the finances, I recall when we talked about agreeing to passport funding from the schools block to the high needs, that it was going to be a temporary arrangement, because the idea of the SSP was over time to reduce the need for more expensive EHC plans. And that links to what, the previous conversation, I know, but I also think, of course, it links to the actual recovery plan, where I think the Schools Forum needs more than just a verbal update. We need a written report about progress towards reducing the size of the SEND funding, given that was the original intent of the that investment. That's my first question or point, really. And then the second one is, Bernadette, your comment about how the therapeutic work is making such a difference. I completely agree. I think that early investment into children, I think, has been revelatory in Rutland. And I also agree with you, is it must flow into the EHC plan process, which stays and seems to me still to be a very rigid process. And I know we've done the work around the banding, but it's only really touching the edges of how we can better support students with those additional needs, and do it in a better way for the children and the families, but actually also a more cost-efficient way as well.
I would agree with both of your comments, and I will definitely take back your remark about more information around the mandate around the recovery plan, the supporting schools partnership. And I think we've always come to this group saying this was a 5-year programme, and I'll revisit the minutes of the last meeting about the commitment to continue to fund that programme. And I do think...
I'm sorry, Bernadette, I'll interrupt just slightly. I'm not saying we should stop the funding of the SSP.
No.
That actually has been one of the best pieces of work I've seen in a very long time. What I'm suggesting is we should then be able to reduce the funding in other aspects of the high needs block, so that we would sustain the SSP, which is a non-statutory framework, and that gives us a lot more flexibility about how we use that funding. My question is more about, are we making any progress of reducing the other aspects of the block to demonstrate that the SSP approach is working?
Yeah, and this is partly what we hope to test through the Delivering Better Value programme. And I don't overcomplicate my response, but we also have the National Change Programme, which again will be testing that the whole SEND system. And I don't know whether Dawn wishes to say anything about it at this point. Dawn, I'm sorry, I'm bringing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in terms of the National Change Programme, it speaks more to less about the kind of Delivering Better Value programme, which is very much focused on delivering a sustainable high needs block and a balanced budget, basically. That's very much the focus of that. The National Change Programme speaks to your second point, Stuart, which is much more about how can we be, so we obviously reference the schools support partnership, how actually can we as a system be more creative and push need downstream away from the specialist end, so reducing the number and the need for education and healthcare plans, and support children with emerging additional needs at that very early point in their journey, whether it's emerging at an early years point or even if it's emerging at a secondary point. But actually that's part of the national programme amongst other things, but that's one of the big pillars around the national programme that we will be testing. That's just kicking off, but I think the point that you're making about how can we be more creative in the use of our limited funding, as well as our capital funding, because there is capital funding that we've obviously talked about here as well. And how can we be best creative to kind of reduce that specialist and costly need is absolutely what those two programmes that we are front and centre delivering are all about. I think my challenge back will be that this is not about the local authority doing things to the sector. It's absolutely, if you have ideas about what would work for the education sector and for children and young people with additional needs in Rutland, we are always all ears. So, absolutely welcome that kind of creative and collaborative thinking.
I've never been backwards about coming forward about
no,
ideas.
Absolutely.
and I think, for me, I think the work that you've done at UCC in terms of that nurture provision, that's offered students another opportunity to stay in the county. I've been very open to growing our special provision here at the college for exactly the same reason as Ben has been open to at UCC. We are willing to do our bit. We want to offer inclusive provision, but I do think there's considerably more to do, because ultimately SEN has to be affordable, because if it's not, what happens is exactly what has happened in this meeting. We take money from other children to put in the SEN pot, and that isn't a sustainable position. And we've now been in this position for a number of years, and we're very fortunate in Rutland that we're small, that we can sit around a room and actually start making a difference to local children, both those who have SEN and those who don't.
Absolutely, and I, obviously we don't disagree with that at all. I mean, one of the things, and I don't want us to go back on the agenda, Ben, at all. However, there is a link with the last agenda item in terms of the budget. I think there might be some value in us having a presentation that's much more wide-ranging about specifically that brings in not just the DSG kind of and high needs block finance position, but actually helps, particularly for new members of Schools Forum, and act as a kind of reminder about actually the two programmes that I've just referenced.
That's exactly my point, Dawn. That's exactly my point. And I think I worry at the moment that this transfer into from the mainstream to the high needs has now just become something that is expected. And it's just now become something that's nodded through, and that was never the intent. It was supposed to be short-term, fund these projects, reduce the size of SEN overall, and do it in a more manageable way. And I think we're at risk of it becoming embedded in the system, which was never the intent. The intent was strategic over a period of time to address those sort of issues. And don't get me wrong, I was the biggest supporter of you joining Ofsted. And I'd have not pulled my punches if I wasn't happy. I think we've made huge progress.
I know.
But I do think that we're still on a journey, and we're at risk of just rolling it through. Some staff are leaving, which is not helpful. I know you can't control that, but we're at danger, I think, at the moment of losing momentum. We've had some good momentum over the last few years.
Yeah, no, I fully hear that, Stuart, and I and support your position. So, let me do a bit of thinking, and probably maybe with Jane and Ben, just about how we might want to do that, whether we do it as an extraordinary meeting of Schools Forum. I'm putting that out there as a question, or we do it as an event that's actually a standalone event for a wider audience. But happy for us to kind of take that out and make, take comments now, but equally do the planning outside this meeting.
Okay, well, Bernadette, thank you for the thorough explanation of everything that's happening with the SEND improvement plan. Stuart, thank you for your queries, and then thanks for the responses that came subsequently. I do think additional information on the National Change Programme would be very welcome. I think it's really important that everybody across the sector in Rutland understands that we are part of something at a national level that not all local authorities are part of, and therefore more information on what that will involve, as well as the delivering better value, would be really welcomed. So if that's something that we can put out there, I'm going to take Stuart's point from earlier that the people in this group, the time is very, very precious and the calendars get full very, very quickly. So organising an additional meeting, I think, will be challenging. If we can put a presentation out into the public domain, which is information giving, I think that would be very useful. Okay, I'm just going to check that we're happy to move on at this point. The next item is 6A, which is the Nurture Hub and Practice Report, which is from Penny Rawlings. I do apologise, Craig, I've just seen a hand up from you.
Yeah, I need to declare an interest because I'm the CEO of Brookhill Academy, and Edith Weston's one of those schools. So just to be clear on that before we go forward.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. So we've had the report from Penny, so we're not going to go through it line by line. I think we should just go straight to the decision recommendations, which are that we note the information on the nurturing performance and the practice change across the schools. And Schools Forum is being asked to approve an increase in funding to 190,000 for Edith Weston as the lead school to accelerate and further develop Rutland Schools practice. It's a relatively moderate increase on the funding that has been previously allocated. So I'm happy, well, I won't be answering the questions on this one because I'm not directly involved in it, but I'm happy for people to raise questions or make comments on this before we have a decision. I see that Stuart has had to leave or will be leaving soon. It's another commitment at 5. So just noted that, Stuart. Thank you for letting us know. So hands up for any comments, queries or questions about the nurture practice decision that we're being asked to make. Stuart.
Sorry, are we chorus if Craig has a conflict of interest?
Jane, could you advise on that one, please?
No, we're not.
Very.
Okay. So that's a very good point. We're not able to take a decision on this, then, are we?
Not because Craig has had to withdraw because of his conflict of interest. That takes you below the Coret membership. So you would have to defer the decision to the next meeting.
Okay.
And I'm just very conscious I am going to have to leave, and I think Ol's got a similar issue. And so it's just if there's any other decisions you need making before we do, because I'm then very conscious that you may well then not be Coret anyway, and I don't want to leave you in that position. I am running out of time.
Well, I believe this is the last major decision we have to make. Item 6B does have a decision, but it's rather that we note the work of the collaborative group and we ask for a member of Schools Forum to be representing. So I don't think that's a problem with us making decisions on that particular one if we haven't got a sufficient number of members present. So, but this is the important one, and I guess we can't make that decision even if we do that before you leave, Stuart.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Craig, from your perspective, what position does that put you in?
Well, it does put us in a position because with the staff, it basically all goes down to money, doesn't it? With the staffing uplifts that have been applied for teachers and TAs, it does takes over the funding. We've Edith Weston does have it's got a large number of service families, but it's got a large number of SEN families outside of the nurture hub as well. So you know, the funding for SEN is already stretched, so it does put an impact on that.
Well, I don't think anybody in the group underestimates the impact of the work that's been happening at Edith Weston in recent years as part of this programme. It's been excellent, and that's been well documented as part of Schools Forum. So it's not a decision that we can make now, but I believe that if we postpone, well, we have to postpone it until February. We've got to make sure that that meeting is core in terms of it being able to make a decision. Because obviously the impact then will have it will be a detrimental effect, won't it, on what you're able to deliver.
Yeah.
I've just seen Peter's hand has gone up, and Jane. So Peter, if you'd like to go first, and then Jane.
Yeah, I just wonder whether it's possible to make a decision via email, because it seems that this is a decision that the school would need in terms of money. So can we not do it via email? Just a suggestion.
Thank you for the suggestion. That's a question I have to pose to Jane. Is that allowed?
I would need to double check that.
Okay.
But what I was going to suggest is, as Jill has suggested earlier, we hold a special meeting of the Schools Forum specifically to cover the 2 finance items.
Okay. Well, it certainly seems to me, because we're so thin on the ground today, that whilst that's going to be a challenging thing to get people available, I think we need to try, because the correct function of the group is to approve important decisions such as that. So Jane, let's put that down as an urgent action for you and I to get a date in the diary and make sure that we've got all the correct people that are able to make that. I think realistically, that's going to have to be second half of the autumn term when schools return in November. Okay, I'm just going to look on my screen to see if there are any other points before we move on. Right, 6B is the report that's been provided for us by Leslie Hawkes, the Early Help Coordinator. This is regarding the Parent Collaborative Group. Again, as it's a paper that's been provided for us in advance, we will take it that all members have read and digested the information, and that we've been asked to make 2 decisions. One is that we note the work achieved by the collaborative group and the engagement work over the past 18 months. And that we identify members of the School Forum who may wish to join existing daytime working groups. And there are 4 areas there that have asked for representatives to join. I'll open it out to the group members. Is anybody willing and able to participate in any of those working groups? Well, Jane, unfortunately, I can't see any hands going up for that. So what I'd like you to do, please, as an action, is to email out to all members of Schools Forum, please, and say, with this particular item, could they get in contact with you if they are able to commit to any of those groups? I can just see Bernadette has raised her hand. So Bernadette, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. If it helps to help that message, I think the particular work stream that we would really value input, and you'll be aware from the visit you and Sharon made to the collaborative group, is around the ordinarily available provision. That's really key. That's where we want to grow that confidence in support already in our schools. So if there was some interest in that, we really would welcome that in particular. It's probably worth saying in terms of the development through the delivering better value within the funding plan. We are seeking some SENCO champions, and we do have funding through the grant to be able to put in place an area SENCO at secondary, primary and early years phases. So they would be really key people to get in place and to be able to be part of this collaborative as well. So I guess what I'm saying in terms of enticement is that there will be some funding to increase the capacity, perhaps release some area Senko support. We're just starting those conversations with people like Carolyn Creasy, who's very close to you in schools and would be able to advise us how best to do that. But certainly we will have the capacity to put in place some Senko champions. So again, I'd just give you the heads up and ask you to consider that. We'll be coming to talk to you about how and whom you might want to nominate for that, an opportunity to work to develop that practice, but certainly contribute to the ordinarily available and the graduated response.
Okay, well, that's great. And we can expect to hear how that's going to work over the next couple of weeks, I imagine.
Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, unless we've got any other hands up, I'm going to move on, which is item 6C, and that is me to give you a very brief update on the Autism Education Trust. So this is a national organisation, and the Rutland element of it, the licence is held by UCC and Oakham C of E, and that's been held for the last 3 years. So jointly we have delivered training for a variety of sectors, mostly education, but it has gone across many areas that deal with young people and children. 425 delegates have been trained through the Autism Education Trust programme. Really high levels of delegate satisfaction through that programme. And myself and Steve Cox, as the head of Oakham C of E, have felt that it would really sit as a useful arm of the Delivering Better Value programme through Schools Forum and Rutland County Council, because it is an important part of training the sector. Rather than we've not just been training our staff. Of course, the staff in our schools have benefited from having some training, but actually the programme has been about broadening that expertise across all schools in Rutland, and we want to enable as many adults that work with young people as possible to receive this high quality training, so that inclusive practice is weaved into all of that ordinarily available practice that Bernadette has been alluding to. So conversations that we'd had with Louise Crookenden Johnson before she'd left her post were that we would like to phase the licence into that Delivering Better Value programme. And really, my point here is just to raise the awareness of the group that was a movement that we'd like to make this year. So it's not down on the agenda as an item for decision. Bernadette, I'd have to ask you about how strategies within the Delivering Better Value programme are, commissioned. Because at the moment this sits with 2 schools, because we just decided to pick that ball up and run with it because of obviously the provisions that we have in our schools. But for that to become a more sort of central service that all schools can benefit from, we felt that it was a strategy that would be good as part of the DVB.
May I come in, Chair?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, yeah, I was asking you a question and really.
Yeah, I think I need to give that some consideration, but I also think that what I've just described around the graduated response and as we talked about earlier through this meeting about the early intervention and potentially the role of the Senkos would tie into this. So let me take that back and give it consideration. I think I'm beginning to see that obviously there's a critical need to be able to share more detail around the Delivering Better Value programme and plan.
Yes.
And I'll speak to colleagues about how we do that.
All right, that's great, thank you. Okay, item 7 then, early years working group. So Joe, this is the last time you'll be contributing, so over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a couple of things, couple of updates and some information from us. There's been an audit, financial funding audit for some settings. they were emailed about this, but we've had a few worried settings when they had external agencies contact them. And unfortunately, they had no notification that there were external, which created a little bit of worry for them. And some of the kind of feedback that we got from that was, again, they were asking for paperwork that had been submitted to Rutland already, and they were worried that it was perhaps a bit of a double check on their setting. So they wanted me to feed that back. The other one was a funding question, but obviously Andrew isn't here, so I suppose it's more of a request than a question. But we really want to know the confirmation of the funding rate for the 2-year-old funding come April 2024, which when it all rolls out. We haven't had that yet, and it's really, as businesses, it's really difficult to then plan how we're going to deliver what we offer for our 2-year-old families and our 2-year-old children without kind of an hourly rate on that funding moving forward. And something else that they wanted really was kind of reassurance that perhaps that then won't be cut at a later date, which in the past we've had funding cut. But again, that's for Andrew, and obviously that he's not here, so if that could be put to him, that would be great. Just something else that continues to happen, and obviously funding and recruitment and things are kind of interlinked. We continue to have the biggest recruitment crisis of early years kind of that they've ever seen, really, and that continues. We have had a setting close, or 2 settings, one in Rutland and one in surrounding area closed because of finances, and they won't, basically kind of what the manager said and the owners have said, that they won't, they want to deliver that high quality early years education, and with the funding as it is at the moment, they can't do that. They don't want to continue to pay minimum wage for the amazing staff that they have. They clearly want to pay more than that, but they want to continue to deliver a high quality, and that can't happen, so they've had to close, which is really sad. And I know that's happening kind of all around the country, not just here. And lastly, we had confirmation that the childminding agency within Rutland had an inadequate Ofsted report, and quite a lot of the childminders have spoken to colleagues just about how sad they're feeling, and quite under a little bit of pressure to await for a date for their re-registration and bits and pieces. So that's quite upsetting for them, and they wanted that to share as well. So that's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, Jo. It's really important that we hear about how that sector is getting on each time. So we really value that, and value all the input that yourself and of course Catherine previously have given to us. So the group got any questions for Jo? Jill?
Just in reference to the audit, the first point that you brought up, the audit was actually to check the local authorities' processes. And we did try to make that assurance that it is actually it was the audit of the local authorities' processes for funding, and are we ensuring that our processes are robust. And I think that's why things like the double paperwork was, did our paperwork match settings paperwork and things like that. But we do recognise that there was the information had gone out to settings quite in advance. And I think there was that gap between the would you be willing to, yes, and then it actually happening. And I think there'd been a gap in that proceedings. But yeah, I just wanted that assurance that it was actually of the local authorities' processes we were asking for. Make sure we're getting it right for the sector.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's helpful. I can feed that back. I just think some settings were quite worried that they hadn't heard that it was going to be kind of external people coming in, and they were just worried that why there was this kind of check.
They are Rutland County Council internal auditors. It's just that they work in Peterborough, and it came from the Peterborough email address rather than through the Rutland, and I think that's what confused it. But it is actually a Rutland internal audit process.
Yeah, I think it just threw them a little bit. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Tim, question. Tim, you're on mute.
I'm going to ask a very naive question. I don't know what settings are. could that be explained?
Joe, you're now on mute.
Sorry, they're nurseries and preschools. So they're just nurseries and preschool settings. That's what we call them as a whole.
I thought that was it, but I just didn't know the term.
Yeah.
And what you say, that they're closing down because of lack of, they can't get the skill. They want to put the salaries up of the workers, and they can't do it. That's what you're saying?
So basically, it's been happening now for a few years, and it's not really getting any better. So obviously, minimum wage is going up, and we want to value our staff and pay above that where we can. And just with the government funding that they give us, kind of, it goes from an hourly rate to then goes into the local authority, and they then deliver that. But it's tricky as a business. We're businesses at the end of the day. As much we class ourselves as education settings, of course, but we are businesses at the end of the day, and we have to be sustainable, and we're having to think outside the box a little bit about how we continue to run. It's quite difficult.
Thank you. Yes, I understand.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll move us on then to pupil place planning, which is a verbal update from Jill.
Yeah, very quick one, because you had the school year 7 reception year data from via Julie from last time, and the SCAP is still at the point where it's with the DFE for sign off. So we're in that sort of medium of nothing really at this point to report, other than to say that Julie and I met with the DFE a couple of weeks ago now. We met with the DFE pupil place planning advisor, with the admissions advisor, and with the schools, the regional schools, well, the regional directors representative for schools as well, just to discuss again the Rutland secondary school particularly pressures, and once again for them to sort of not necessarily add any value to the things that we're already doing. But I think it's important that we keep pushing back to the DFE about the pressures within Rutland, particularly at the secondary level. So there's nothing new to report at this point in time, but we're in the position that we're in at the moment.
Thank you, Jill. I'm always conscious of us using acronyms and the new people coming into the...
Oh, sorry, yes.
The SCAP,
school capacity assessment, which is held annually, where we look at the number of places available across the local authority for our primary schools and our secondary schools.
Fabulous, thank you. Any questions for Jill? Thank you, Jill. Right then, work plan for 23-24. We have that in our packs. Does anybody have any comments on this? So we have the February agenda items, which we can add to. And of course, if there are things that members want to add to the agenda, then please go directly to Jane. May 24 is not populated yet, but that's normal for us at this time of year. And as we mentioned earlier, Jane and myself will liaise very quickly next week so that we can get something in the diary for November about an additional meeting for some of those funding decisions. So just give colleagues a short opportunity to make any comments on any of those points. Jill?
Just to say that the annual review of schools forum membership should be May and not February. Otherwise,
it's a great
we'll be meeting ourselves coming back.
Yeah. Okay, and then finally, any urgent business? I've not received any. Jane, has anything come through directly to yourself?
I've not received anything, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. So our meeting dates as scheduled are 1st of February and the 9th of May, which will be on Zoom, and we will publish hopefully a November date as soon as possible once we have made a few decisions and consulted a few other people. So I'm just going to look around the room just to make sure there's no hands up. Jill, I think that's a legacy hand that you've got up there. Yeah, a little bit longer than normal today, but there was some robust discussion, which is why I think we've gone slightly over. Thank you all for your time. Jane, as ever, thank you for keeping us organised and for all the work you did in preparation for this. Joe, thank you for your service to the group. Very appreciative of everything that you've done. I wish you all a happy evening and see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Meeting closed 17:16.